Welcome to the Dawgs Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Justin Charles and Josh All.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Dawgs Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Josh All, and Justin Charles is not here with me today. He had a little emergency babysitting situation that he had to dive into today. And so he's playing daddy to not just his kids, but to, I don't even know how many got dropped off with him. Kind of last second, had a little family, not an emergency, but just a situation. So I am here. You guys are stuck with me, and it's unfortunate, not just because I'm not that great of a podcaster, but just because we were going to do another mock draft today. But rather than do the mock draft by myself, it's much more fun when Justin's here to do it with me. So we're going to wait. We're going to do mock draft next week on the episode. But today, what I'm going to do is just continue the divisional breakdowns, talk about some news around the league. We're going to get into the NFC South. Today, we're going to do the South divisions, and I'm going to start in the NFC because, honestly, I think it's probably the most cut and dry, easy division to break down for fantasy purposes. So I feel pretty comfortable just sitting here and talking about it all by myself without Justin here to bounce the conversation back and forth with. So before I dive into all that, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, tap that notification bell, and please, if you guys are listening on audio, please give us a 5-star review. Those really do help out the show, and we appreciate it a ton. So just some quick news and notes. There has been so much going on in training camp and stuff around the leagues and names to be paying attention to. The big one, obviously, especially for us being also a Cleveland Browns podcast, is Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver for the 49ers. At this point in time, we don't know where he's going to end up, but I, for a while, felt like the most likely scenario is Brandon Aiyuk is going to end up right back in San Francisco, either on a 1-year, well, I guess not even a 1-year deal because he's under contract for this year, but I just did not think they were going to get the extension. But it's like, dude, if you want to hold out, you're going to lose all your money, but we're not trading you kind of situation. I figured he'd probably end up playing anyway. Not so much anymore. I really do feel like San Francisco is just done with the whole situation. I think that he has made it very clear that to his credit, I do think he is one of the top talented wide receivers in the league. I've talked about it a lot on Twitter here recently. As far as numbers go, I think a lot of people can just kind of, box score surf and say, well, Brandon Aiyuk was okay. I mean, he had a good season, but he had like 76 receptions, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. Like, okay, that's nice, but that's not elite level production for a wide receiver. But what people don't understand in the deeper metrics of Aiyuk and the 49ers is the 49ers were the lowest passing volume team in the entire NFL last year. They were 32nd in the whole league in pass attempts. They just didn't throw the ball a ton. So for Brandon Aiyuk to be able to put up those numbers in the lowest volume passing offense alongside 3 other not good, not pretty good, not great, but elite receiving options next to him in Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle. I mean, for him to be able to do that in that situation does show me that Brandon Aiyuk is among the elite, and I think he knows that. And you got to understand, these players have a window. They have a window. They have a very small opportunity to get the maximum contract they can get, and that's what he's trying to do right now. So can't fault a guy for trying to get his money for what he feels he is worth. People do it at work all the time. So we'll see what happens. But right now, it is looking like it's down between first it was the Browns and the Patriots. The Steelers were out, and then the Patriots backed out, and the Steelers came back in with some more negotiations. So now it's Browns and Steelers. There's reports everywhere. Reports say he's not that interested in coming to Cleveland. He's more interested in going to Pittsburgh, which I don't understand. But let's break it down from a fantasy perspective, just hypothetical. I won't spend too much time because once he does get traded, then we'll have the real conversation. But if you're holding on to Brandon Aiyuk in a dynasty league right now, or thinking about trading for or trading him away or whatever, or even if you got redrafts coming up early in August here. Some leagues start early, some leagues draft mid-August, and that's coming up. So Brandon Aiyuk goes to Cleveland. Much better situation, much better quarterback. You guys have watched my episode, I'm sure, on Deshaun Watson, why I think he's a very good sleeper at the quarterback position this year. They've got a 2-time head coach of the year on offense. They've got a good offensive line. They've got a good run game. There is some competition for targets there with, if Amari Cooper stays, obviously he would be the main competition, but he's probably going to be included in the trade. Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, Elijah Moore, anybody out of the backfield. But it's not the same level of competition that he had in San Francisco. And Cleveland throws the ball a whole heck of a lot more than San Francisco does. And they're going to throw it even more this year with Ken Dorsey and the new passing offense in Cleveland. So the ideal fantasy situation for Brandon Aiyuk, clearly it's not the Patriots. If he goes to New England, the value of Brandon Aiyuk drops significantly. If you have him, like in a dynasty league, you're going to have to hold him because, yes, he becomes the clear-cut number one on a very bad, low-scoring output offense for this year. It might not be like the worst offense in the world, but it ain't going to be what it was in San Francisco for him. And if he goes to Pittsburgh, I don't see Pittsburgh being that great of a situation, given that the quarterback situation there is questionable. Is Russell Wilson washed? Does he still have stuff left in the tank? He was okay last year. He wasn't terrible. But, what's it going to be like in an Arthur Smith run-heavy offense? Now you've got George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth. There's not that much competition for targets, but the thing is, you're still competing for some targets in an offense that has a much smaller passing volume. So it would be more similar to San Francisco in that regard, but the quality of that passing volume is going to be significantly worse than it was in San Francisco. So Pittsburgh to me does not scream great opportunity. So for me, really in fantasy, like I'm pushing, not just because I'm a Browns fan, but I Brandon Aiyuk in a dynasty league. Out of these three teams, Patriots, Steelers, Browns, I want to see him on the Browns. I think he's got the best opportunity to be a very high production receiver for fantasy in Cleveland, not so much in the other two spots. We'll just go down some of these hot names real quick. Just some names to take a look at. If you're playing in Dynasty, take a look at your waivers. Jordan Mason seems to be kind of claiming the backup running back role in San Francisco. Christian McCaffrey is out right now with a calf injury. He was on the Madden cover, so we knew it was coming. But we saw what a calf injury did to Joe Burrow last year. And, we'll get more news about Christian McCaffrey in the days to come. I think he's going to be out for a couple of weeks in training camp. They're not going to push this. Obviously, he's their best player on offense. But if you've got Christian McCaffrey, or if you decide to take him at 101 in a draft coming up, just keep an eye on Jordan Mason as the draft gets later and later, and just make sure you grab him, put him on your roster, because Elijah Mitchell's already out with an injury, and Kyle Shanahan has spoken very, very highly this offseason during camp about Jordan Mason, and I think that he is going to be that main guy to own if anything would happen to CMC. Sounds like Justice Hill might be worth a look in the Baltimore backfield behind Derrick Henry. For a while, we were thinking it's probably going to be their, fifth-round rookie in Rasheen Ali, but I don't know. Harbaugh comes out, says Justice Hill, he views him as a starting running back in the league. He's going to play a lot. I think that if a guy's getting carries in this offense outside of Derrick Henry, it's sounding like it's going to be Justice Hill, so just keep your eye on that one. Some other names, Deneric Prince, backup running back for Kansas City. I think he spent all last year on their practice squad, undrafted free agent, but he was the guy last year who made a splash in training camp. But I think he had some issues in pass protection and some stuff like that. Young rookie, undrafted guy, just needs some refinement, but he's stuck on all season. They brought him back this year, and now he's taken reps with the first team. He's the first running back to touch the ball after Isaiah Pacheco. He's the primary second-team running back. Deneric Prince, at this point in time, looks like he is going to be the backup running back for Isaiah Pacheco, and that's an offense that I want the backup running back. If I don't have, someone's going to draft Isaiah Pacheco, and if Isaiah Pacheco gets hurt at any point, Deneric Prince, if he's the backup, becomes a clear league winner, in my opinion. So an eye on that. The other eye needs to stay on Trey Sermon, backup running back for the Indianapolis Colts. We saw what Zach Moss did last year when he got to fill in for Jonathan Taylor when he missed time. There's a Jonathan Taylor, I can't remember last time he had a full season, so there's a good possibility that there's going to be backup running back carries to go around in Indianapolis at some point this season. Trey Sermon, per all the reports, has the backup job pretty much locked up. I know he hasn't done anything in the NFL to this point, but Zach Moss hadn't done a whole lot either until he got to Indy last year. So look at Trey Sermon as well. Just keep an eye on him. If he's on your dynasty waiver, you might want to throw him on to the back of your bench. Just look at a couple other people here. Honestly, not really. Not a whole other ton of names that I want to dive into too much there. I'm sure there's other news that needs to be touched on. I'm probably missing, but we'll get into more news next week when Justin gets here. We're going to have our first weekend of preseason games take place. We're going to get a lot of intel from some of those games. There's going to be, unfortunately, some more injuries that come up. So we'll deal with those things as they come. But for now, I would like to shift over and talk about the NFC South, talk about some fantasy options that you guys might want to be looking at in your upcoming drafts this season.
This episode is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Dog Pack, the summer is in full swing, and you guys know what that means. Omaha Steaks annual Hotter Than Fire sale. Go to omahasteaks.com right now, and for a limited time, you guys can get big savings on great packages from Omaha Steaks for just $99. Plus, you guys can get an extra $10 off that order with promo code DAWGS, DAWGS, at checkout. So these packages with that promo code are essentially $89. From exquisite steaks to legendary burgers, the premium pork, the air-chilled chicken, the meatballs, the chicken wings, the appetizers, the ready-to-eat meals, the wine, everything that Omaha Steaks has to offer. Head over there today, check it out. Shop the Hotter Than Fire sale to get these exclusive savings on the mouth-watering packages that start at just $99 plus. Use that code DAWGS, DAWGS, when you check out for an extra $10 off your order. But hurry, because this sale is only available for a limited time. Summer always flies by, and this deal is going to fly by, so you're not going to want to miss it. Go shop today, omahasteaks.com. Use promo code DAWGS at checkout for an extra $10 off your order.
So the first team that I want to talk about, and again, like I said, the open of this show, I think this is going to be a pretty quick, cut and dry kind of divisional breakdown for me today, just because the fantasy options are either clear you want them, or clear you don't. And in Atlanta, I think it's very simple. Bijan Robinson, running back, you can draft him 101 if you want to. If the CMC injury scares you in training camp and you're like, well, what if that lingers on into the season? He misses a couple games or whatever. It limits him. He splits more time. There's nothing wrong with taking Bijan Robinson ahead of Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion. When it comes to running backs, CMC, Bijan Robinson, and Breece Hall. Pick. If you're at 101, I don't care which, and you want a running back, I don't care which running back you take. I won't fault you for taking any one of those three guys. So Bijan, obviously, is a top pick in the draft this year, so you draft him. Now, Tyler Algier, his backup, was always a thorn in the side last year under Arthur Smith. Don't know how much that's going to happen this year. I know there's been a little bit of coach speak about, well, we're going to use Tyler Algier and all this kind of stuff, splitting work and whatever. But, I think Raheem Morris and these guys in Atlanta taking over will have a better understanding of your best players need to be on the field. They give you the best chance to win. That's why any Arthur Smith offense, we've only ever seen him be good with Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry's an outlier type of player. So is Arthur Smith a good offensive coordinator and just a bad head coach, or did he just kind of get lucky with the players that he had in Tennessee? I don't remember A.J. Brown being elite A.J. Brown in Tennessee when Arthur Smith was there. So I think the Arthur Smith effect was real. Glad he's out of Atlanta. I think Bijan Robinson can clearly be drafted wherever you want up at the top of the draft. Don't hesitate taking him. Algier's not exactly a guy that I'm targeting. If I have Bijan, I think that he's going to be okay the whole season. If you want to kind of handcuff yourself later in the draft, I'm not 100% sure where Algier is going, but that's always an option as well. But he's not somebody that, if somebody else takes Bijan, I'm thinking, well, I want to try to take some high-end backups, later on in the draft. Allgeier's he's okay. He's fine. If you end up with him on your team, that's cool, but he's not somebody I'm targeting. At wide receiver, it's Drake London for Atlanta, and that's pretty much it, to be honest with you. I mean, Darnell Mooney, if you wanted to take a shot, but, Rondale Moore just got carted off with a cast, I think, today or recently here. Take Drake London, and I think that you can go ahead and expect. He's been very, very good on very bad offenses with bad quarterback play so far in his very young career, and I think he's going to be okay. I think he's going to be fine where you draft him. You got to invest a little more in him, and it's a little more of a gamble than some of the other guys going around him, but I think the gamble is going to be worth it because his quarterback, Kirk Cousins, was lighting the league on fire, or at least fantasy leagues on fire, last year before he got injured. And Kirk Cousins has always been a very good, high-volume, accurate type of quarterback, and that bodes so well for a guy like Drake London who earns targets at a high rate. He gets open. He's going to earn the trust of his quarterback, and I think Kirk Cousins just peppers the living daylights out of targets for Drake London. So take him. Other receivers in that offense, I'm not really interested in whatsoever. The only other pass catcher that I'm interested in, obviously, Kyle Pitts. It hasn't worked yet. I mean, he had a nice rookie season, and ever since then, disappointing. Are we going to do it again with Kyle Pitts? I do a lot of mock drafts, and whenever I get to the point in the draft where his name is on the board, I always hesitate. Yes, does he have the athletic ability and the talent to emerge with a good quarterback and a good offensive system and be the tight end one overall? Yeah, I do. I think he does. I think that is definitely within the range of possibilities. But there's other players in that range that I find myself liking, and when we do our mock draft next week, you guys will kind of see those players and the decisions we end up making when we go through it. But, I find myself gravitating more toward, let me wait a round or two here. Let me see where Evan Ingram ends up. Evan Ingram ends up being my target at tight end a lot in mock drafts. If I don't get him, I'm looking at Jake Ferguson, maybe David Njoku, though. If I take a David Njoku, I definitely want to ensure that with like a TJ Hawkinson that I throw on my IR or another like Pat Freiermuth. I need to get another tight end because I don't know. I don't feel confident that David Njoku is going to be an every week starter. We'll see how the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season go for him, and that might give us a better idea. But at this point, I'm sort of passing Kyle Pitts, though that's not like my recommendation. I think if you want him, if you believe in him, if you think, yes, this is the year finally, then go for it. Take it. Fantasy is about taking risks. It's about looking at the upside of a player versus the risk of the downfall if he doesn't reach that upside. Where you have to draft Kyle Pitts if he has another very disappointing year, yeah, it's going to suck. But one thing to remember, too, is last year he was injured. I don't know how many people know that. He had a knee injury that was ailing him. I think it was a knee injury that was bugging him all season. It wasn't anything that was going to hold him out of games or needed surgery or anything like that during the season, but, it limited him. So that also, I think, played into part of, along with the Desmond Ridder crap, but I think Kyle Pitts is okay, is basically what I'm trying to get at here. So take him if you want him. If you believe, then just go for it. Just because I find myself passing on him for some other players in that range does not necessarily mean that's the right move. And then I mentioned Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is another fine late-round quarterback where he's going. He's going reasonably late, which I feel like he always does anyway. He's a guy that, if you miss out on some quarterbacks that you were eyeing up earlier in the draft, just load up on those running backs and wide receivers. Just load up. Take Kirk Cousins later, and then take a Take a flyer even later on Deshaun Watson, who does have top 5 fantasy quarterback upside because he's done it before, which, by the way, so does Kirk Cousins. So that kind of a pairing would be okay, I think is good. And then if you end up wanting to take a high ceiling running quarterback and you take like a Jaden Daniels early, but you don't feel so confident that you want him to be your only quarterback on your roster, grab Kirk Cousins later. He's a great guy to to pair up with a young running quarterback like Jaden Daniels. So that's the Falcons really in a nutshell. It's really those 4 guys, and that's really all I care about from that team. Let's move over to the Saints, the New Orleans Saints. Running back wise, Alvin Kamara, I think he was very inefficient last year on the ground. Running the ball, not great. Catching the ball, peppered with targets. Derek Carr loves to check the ball down. And I think Alvin Kamara is going to be it this year. I think he's going to be the main guy. Yet again, Kendre Miller is still not practicing in training camp, out with his knee injury or whatever it is, hamstring, I forget now, because Dennis Allen doesn't care about Kendre Miller, and I think that he's a really good, talented running back. But even though I don't agree with Dennis Allen making those public remarks about Kendre Miller, I do agree with the remarks themselves, in that you cannot help the team if you're always in the training room. And that's where Kendre Miller has spent his career to this point. Jamal Williams was a whole bunch of nothing last year. So, guys, what I tend to do, and this is just my strategy, I love wide receivers, especially I have a league that I play in every year, and it's a this league has been going on forever. 3 wide receiver league, 2 flex. I go so wide receiver heavy. I won the entire league last year going 0 RB. I didn't draft a running back until like round 10 or something. So Alvin Kamara is the perfect running back to draft. Where's he going, like the 6th or 7th round or something like that? If you go, wide receivers and you grab a tight end or something early and you bypass running back altogether for a while, where Alvin Kamara is going right now in drafts, I have no problem taking him and saying, okay, I'm not looking at him like a running back one. I'm looking at him like a strong running back piece in my makeshift running back rotation in my 0 RB strategy. And I think that for that sort of a roster build, Alvin Kamara is very good, especially if it's a PPR league, like the league I just talked about. My league is a PPR league. That's a very good option. So I'm definitely targeting Alvin Kamara where he's going. And outside of that, no other running backs. Don't care about the backups right now in New Orleans. Those are waiver wire guys. Receivers, this is very similar to New Orleans. It's Chris Olave, and that's about it. You could take Rashid Shaheed later in the draft if you want to. I think that he's got some upside, but again, he's going to be more of a go route, make a big play, maybe 2 a game, maybe not even 1 play. I mean, to get a deep shot to connect is not easy to do in the NFL. So to even do 1 a game is pretty tough. So I think Shaheed has room to grow in his role, but I also think that he is more of a one-trick pony than a fantasy flex utility guy. I just don't know how much you're going to get out of him on I got to plug this guy in this week. Let's hope for that big play. I mean, you can go that route, but Chris Olave is the main guy. I think that he's got potential to get into like the top 6, the top half of the wide receiver ones this year. It just depends on Derek Carr, but they brought in Kubiak from San Francisco for the offensive coordinator. And I don't have the exact numbers, but I do understand that from everything I've heard and listened to and read, when the Saints used motion, pre-snap motion, Chris Olave, like he was first of all, he's just a great route runner. He's open, he gets open, and they use him a lot deep down the field. And if they would use him more in the intermediate areas of the field, his receptions, which were already pretty high, his receptions would go up, his yardage would go up, all that kind of stuff. With Kubiak, he's going to use a lot of pre-snap motion, which the Saints, I think it was the lowest rate in the league last year, if I'm not mistaken. It was either the lowest or one of the lowest rates of pre-snap motion, which just kind of bland and doesn't really help your offense much if you can't use pre-snap motion. So I'm excited to see what this offense looks like this year for New Orleans. I think that Chris Olave has the potential to dominate the intermediate areas of the field with the ability to still stretch the field and get deep for those deep shots. But I feel like Chris Olave is just going to get target after target after target. And where he's going in the second round of drafts, take him. If you go running back in the first round and you take Olave as your wide receiver one in the second round, that's a great strategy as well, because Olave has the potential to be just, I really do think he's got top level potential. It's just a matter of whether or not Derek Carr can get him there. But with the new offensive system, I think it's going to be, he might not get to that top 6, but I think he's still going to be a wide receiver 1, and with some pretty big weeks to fill out the year. And I'm not really interested in any of the other receivers right now in New Orleans. Tight end, no, I'm not drafting any tight ends from New Orleans, so we can just kind of skip that in total. Other than me, just if you don't know, Juwan Johnson's been their main tight end for a while. He's out with a foot injury. I think he's coming back. He might even, I think he's still on PUP, but they think he'll be back sometime early in the season. I don't know if he'll be back for the start of the season. They've got a rookie, Dallin Hoker, we'll see if he even makes the roster. I think he was a UDFA. Foster Moreau's never been a fantasy-worthy tight end. And then, of course, there's Taysom Hill. And with Taysom Hill, he's so frustrating. You can't even use him in best ball if you do any best ball, at least not on Underdog, which is where I do all of my best ball drafts, because they have him listed only as a quarterback. That doesn't help me. That doesn't help me because his big weeks are like 25 points. Well, that's huge coming from the tight end position, but from the quarterback position, okay. The other 2 guys I drafted at quarterback, I'm hoping are getting me 20 to 25 points. So not a whole lot of help from Underdog with the Taysom Hill thing. If he's listed as a tight end and a quarterback, or even just a tight end in your leagues, that's fine if you want to take the shot. But again, he's such a spike, boom or bust kind of player. I'm not drafting him. I'm probably going to let him sit on the waiver wire. I'll pick him up if I need to. If I need to take a shot, in week 2 or 3 for something, and I'm like, well, I'll just grab Taysom Hill and throw him into my tight end position. But other than that, not super interested in Taysom. Quarterback Derek Carr, I'm not drafting him in a redraft league. At least in a single quarterback. I mean, I think a lot of this goes without saying, but in a super flex or 2-quarterback league, all starting quarterbacks will get drafted. They every single one, and some high-end backups are all going to get drafted. They're not just going to sit there on the waiver wire. In a 1-quarterback league, no interest whatsoever in Derek Carr. He just does not have the passing yardage or the touchdown upside to be anything more than a low-end quarterback 2. He has 0 rushing upside, so no interest in Derek Carr for a single quarterback redraft. And I think that's pretty much it with the Saints. Like I said, these teams are a lot easier to talk about. Let's see. Let's just move. I'm going to kind of save probably the one with the most fantasy options for last. I'm going to go move now to the Panthers. Let's just, same discussion. Bryce Young, 1-quarterback league. Nope, not interested. Let him sit on the waivers. Not drafting him. Running back, Jonathan Brooks. The rookie, still recovering from his ACL injury last November in college at Texas. He was a 2nd-round pick. Dave Canales comes over from Tampa Bay. He used Rachaad White like crazy out of the backfield. He was the bell cow. He got all the carries. He got all the receptions. I mean, they just used him for everything. That's what everybody expects to happen for Jonathan Brooks in Carolina when he comes back. Now, they came out and said that he's probably not going to be available till at least 4 weeks into the season. So Jonathan Brooks is a guy, and we've talked about this all summer. This has kind of been the sentiment about him since he was drafted to begin with. So this isn't really new news or advice, but again, the dude could be a back of the season league-winning running back. Because if it's like, let's use Breece Hall as the template from last year. Breece Hall came back from his ACL injury the year before. First half of the year, kind of slow, not real explosive, didn't have the big games. The second half of the year, as he got further removed from that injury and he got more into his football shape, he took off. And that's the expectation for Jonathan Brooks. So I am drafting Jonathan Brooks. Where I can get him in the draft, especially if I'm doing what I talked about earlier with Alvin Kamara and I take him a little bit later. I'm going to try to match him up with somebody like Jonathan Brooks, and I'm throwing Brooks immediately onto my IR spot because that's where he's going to start the season so that I can pick somebody else up. And if I take Jonathan Brooks, I have no problem grabbing his eventual backup in Chuba Hubbard, who will presumably be the starter for the first however many weeks of the season when Brooks is out. And Chuba Hubbard was really, really good last year on a poorly coached team on a bad offense at the end of the season whenever he was getting all the work. And I expect Chuba to get all that work early in the season. So it's kind of a nice move, at least in my opinion. This is what I'm trying to pull off in some of my drafts. Draft Jonathan Brooks because you have to take him before Chuba. That's the ADP. Brooks is higher. So I'm grabbing him knowing that he's going onto my IR. And then I'm grabbing Chuba later knowing that he's probably going into my running back 2 spot, especially if I'm like a 0 RB build. Chuba could, for the first 4 weeks of the season, could easily be my RB2 and give me some big games in that first stretch of the season. And remember what I told you guys a bunch already on the show. You play fantasy football, you don't play it a season at a time. You play it chunks of weeks at a time. And the first chunk is like weeks 1 through 4. How do I win the first 4 weeks of my season? I'll worry about the next 4 games after that when the first 4 are over. But especially later in the drafts, who's going to help me right away that I know, okay, so I draft Chuba later. I know he's going to be the main guy in Carolina. I'm going to play him. He might be my RB2. This is great. This is wonderful. It's all working out great. We get the reports. Jonathan Brooks is activated off of IR. He's coming back. All this stuff. Just drop him. Just drop Chuba, pick somebody else up. At that point in the season, there's going to be other people on the waiver wire that it's like, hey, I need to go put a bid in for this receiver or for this running back. Well, at that point, Chuba can be the guy you drop because you know Brooks is coming back. They're probably going to split time. Neither of them might be very valuable for the first couple of weeks that they're there together. Who knows? But Chuba's a very good option, at least to get you through that first stretch of the season. So keep Chuba on your short list of late round running backs to grab for that first part of the season. Miles Sanders, forget about him. He's gone. Let's see. Wide receivers, Deontay Johnson. We saw what Adam Thielen was able to do last year with Bryce Young. And I think that Deontay Johnson could be a highly targeted guy for Carolina. And I think that in terms of Carolina Panthers receivers, the only one that I'm willing to draft in a redraft league is Deontay Johnson. Xavier Legette, I know he was a first-round rookie. I know he's shown some things in camp. He's got a foot injury that everything came back negative, but he's already dealing with a little bit of an injury in camp. Keep an eye on that. He's a guy that I would much rather watch go to waivers or watch somebody else draft in my redraft league and then drop and just monitor his progression because I don't think he's going to be impactful for the first part of the season anyhow. Adam Thielen, I know he was that guy last year, but I think Deontay comes in and kind of takes over that role. I don't think he's going to have enough to be fantasy relevant, at least for you to want to start confidently at any point. So he's another guy not bothering with in my drafts. If he's on the waivers and he has a big week 1, maybe I think about adding him, but I think it's kind of fool's gold at this point with him. Excuse me. Man, I don't think there's any other receivers I really care about. Jonathan Mingo, I just want to mention this more for Dynasty because, again, I am not drafting Jonathan Mingo in redraft leagues, but in Dynasty, the dude has garnered some very encouraging reports from camp, from the coach, from the quarterback, from beat reporters. Sometimes you hear good reports, the quarterback will talk up a guy or the coach will say something nice about a guy or maybe 1 or 2 reporters say, hey, this guy looked pretty good. They're all saying the same thing about Jonathan Mingo is that he looks night and day difference from last year to this year. If he's there in Dynasty, which in deeper leagues, he's not available on the waiver wire. He's on somebody's bench. But maybe if you're working a trade with a team and we're depending on how the value scale is tipping one way or the other, and you're like, I just want a little bit more value from my opponent to toss in to make this trade acceptable. maybe go after Jonathan Mingo. I would not go after him directly. I don't think it's worth that. But I think that on a throw-in piece, on a bigger trade or anything like that, I think it might be worth a gamble. We'll see. But definitely not drafting him in redraft. And as far as tight end goes, I mean, they've got the rookie Jatavian Sanders out of Texas. I'm not drafting him in redraft. There's no tight ends to draft and redraft from Carolina. Let's just put it that way. So in Dynasty, Jatavian Sanders is interesting. Again, rookie tight ends. Last year was kind of an anomaly with, Laporta and Kincaid, but these rookie tight ends usually don't do much for the first couple years of their career. So I'm not expecting much out of Jatavian Sanders at all. And I don't really even know who the other tight ends on their roster are because it doesn't matter. So that wraps that up for the Carolina Panthers. Finally, we get to the division champs last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
This episode is brought to you by Baden Sports. Baden Sports is your one-stop shop for all your athletic gear. Baden started out perfecting and manufacturing the best balls in the business. Yeah, if that sounded dirty, that's more about your mind than my words. But hey, it's true. Baseballs, softballs, footballs, basketballs, volleyballs, soccer balls, you name it, and Baden has engineered the highest standard sports balls available. And now they offer more than just sports balls. If you got kids playing baseball or softball, Baden has batting gloves and bats to go along with both game balls and training balls. If you're into basketball, Baden makes basketball specifically for indoor or outdoor use. Heck, Baden even has all the equipment you need for pickleball, which is one sport that I hear everyone is playing and yet I still never have. And I need to fix that soon. But don't miss the backyard games section of Baden's website where you can order everything you need for this upcoming outdoor season. Pool balls, backyard volleyball nets, croquet, bocce, horseshoes, cornhole, and more. Right now, you can get 10% off your entire order at Baden Sports, BADEN Sports.com/dogs, DAWGS, and use promo code DOGS when you check out. That's 10% off all the top quality sporting gear you need this season. BadenSports.com/dogs.
I think, and Justin's talked about this a lot. This is the one part of the show where I wish Justin was really, really here so we could have this conversation, because we both really think that Dave Canales had more to do with Tampa Bay's success last year, with Baker Mayfield's success last year, than a lot of people might realize. Industry people seem to be on that same page, or at least acknowledging that possibility. Casual players of the game maybe don't understand that impact. But Dave Canales was the guy I believe he was the Seahawks quarterback coach. I don't think he was the OC. 2 years ago when Geno Smith had his quarterback 5 finish, I think it was quarterback 5. Most accurate passer in the league that year. Breakout, got himself a long-term contract in Seattle there and all that kind of stuff. He left, went to Tampa Bay last year where Geno Smith had a down year. Baker Mayfield traded from the Browns, played like ass in Carolina, went out to L.A. He had one nice game there when he first got there, and that was all you ever heard from him there. Ended up in Tampa Bay. Dave Canales comes in. Baker Mayfield has resurrected his career. And now Dave Canales leaves, and he goes with the aforementioned Carolina Panthers. That's why Bryce Young, in a super flex league, I would consider drafting Bryce Young if I've already got 2 quarterbacks. Maybe if I took 2 early, or one early, one like in the 4th or 5th round, maybe I'll take a shot on Bryce Young later. But I just still don't trust him. But if he has like a QB2 type of season under Dave Canales, I also wouldn't be surprised, because Canales has now got a track record of doing this with quarterbacks. So we will see what happens in Tampa Bay this year. Baker Mayfield, we'll just start there. Not drafting him in a redraft league. He's on the Derek Carr level, in my opinion, as far as limited upside, fantasy-wise, doesn't throw a lot of yards, doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns. Not enough to be fantasy relevant in a 1-quarterback league. In a 2-quarterback league, sure. I take a shot on Baker Mayfield, especially if I take if I got a high pick in the first round and I take like a Josh Allen or something, because that's where I'm at, and then it swings back around in the second round, I'm taking maybe 2 higher end receivers. Baker Mayfield's a nice quarterback too to grab a little bit later, but buyer beware. Caution to everybody coming from a Browns fan. Go back and look throughout the history of Baker Mayfield's career. The dude has never put together 2 consecutive good seasons of football. He just hasn't. This could be the year. This could be the time. In Tampa Bay, maybe this is it. Geno Smith didn't have a good career until he was late in his career. Baker's not old by any means, but I just think that there's I don't want to say strong, but I think there's a very reasonably expected chance that this is going to be a down year for Tampa Bay from what they had last year. And we'll see how Baker does, how he fares year 2 in Tampa Bay. But again, one quarterback redraft leagues, he's off my board completely. Let him hit the waivers. Don't worry about him. Running back, Rachaad White. Again, I think he's fantasy relevant for sure. If you get him on your team, you're probably going to be okay. In a dynasty league, Rachaad White's the type of player that I'm looking to move right now if I can get some value for him. Like if somebody values him higher than what I think he's worth, I'm moving him because first of all, he came in the league older than most running backs. It's usually not great for their long-term career. 2, he's super inefficient on the ground. He's just not a very efficient runner. He's a very good pass catcher. They get him a lot of targets, and he catches them. So in a PPR league, Rachaad White is a nice running back to have as your RB2. Again, if you're going 0 RB, he's the first one you take. I don't mind that, honestly. Especially if you're going to pair him with like 3 or 4 other high ceiling, even if they have the lower floor type of running backs later in the draft, that's fine. Rachaad White, I think, is going to be okay for fantasy again this year. But again, like dynasty, I'm probably looking to cash in now if I've got the opportunity. And then receivers, Mike Evans, you draft him. Last year, he was drafted so late. His ADP was so far down the board. He was like the most valuable fantasy player you could get last year because of what you got out of him based on where you drafted him. I mean, I got him as like my 5th wide receiver on my team last year, and he was like the second best one on my unit just because I had CeeDee Lamb. So Mike Evans, take him. He's going to have another 1,000-yard season. He doesn't miss games. He catches a ton of touchdown passes. Mike Evans is a fantasy stud, and I'm just going to keep drafting him every year until it falls off, and then I'll eat it on that year. But Mike Evans is a guy I love having on my teams. Chris Godwin, I think, can be a value a little bit later because he's had some down times recently, but there's been some injuries, and they've talked about moving him back into the slot, which is where he excelled earlier in his career. So I think that Chris Godwin could be similar. I'm not saying he's going to be the same production-wise, similar to what you had with Mike Evans last year, where his ADP pushed him down the board, and he ended up outproducing that ADP by a ton. And I think Chris Godwin could do that too. Now, I don't think he's going to be like a mid-range wide receiver 1 or anything. But I think you can get wide receiver 2 potential out of Chris Godwin, and you probably get him as like your 4th receiver on your team, maybe. So I think that's very good value for Chris Godwin. The other name to keep an eye on for the wide receivers in Tampa Bay is Jalen McMillan, the rookie out of Washington. It sounds like everything out of camp that the kid is blowing the covers off right now. I think he's going to be the 3rd receiver on the field. He's going to be the opposite outside receiver of Mike Evans while Chris Godwin gets moved back into the slot. And who knows? I mean, maybe McMillan is serviceable for fantasy. I don't know if this team is going to have the passing production, output, volume, all that kind of stuff to really give you more than 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers. Maybe, but with a lot of the targets still going to Rachaad White, Jalen McMillan is probably not in consideration for me in a redraft league unless I'm taking a flyer late and just see what I've got in the first week or 2 of the season. Now, in dynasty leagues, I think you want him on your team because I think that Mike Evans, his career isn't much longer in the NFL. Chris Godwin's getting older, and I think at some point, Jalen McMillan could end up being a good fantasy contributor from this team, but just not this year Definitely not for a redraft league. And then tight end, Cade Otton, he's a cool dude. I think he's got good talent, and I like his, everything that he's shown on the field. I think he's on the field a ton. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think he's out there a lot. Just doesn't get targeted a ton. They've got all these other pass catchers. They've got Rachaad White. Cade Otton is the perfect waiver wire tight end to keep an eye on as the season goes forward. So that's pretty much it. That's the breakdown of the NFC South. Again, an easier division to break down because it's the worst division in the entire NFL. So if you're the worst division, that means you probably have the least amount of fantasy players to talk about, which is true, as you guys just witnessed. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. Was there anybody I missed? Was there anybody that I'm undervaluing, overvaluing? Do you have a different opinion on somebody? Let's talk about it, because that's what this is all about. Talking fantasy football. It's what we love to do. It's what you guys love to do. If you're watching this or listening to this, you are fantasy nuts, and we love it. So engage with us, talk to us. We love responding to the comments and getting some interaction going. Again, like this video on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel. Help us grow the show. Do everything you guys can. And honestly, just being here and watching and listening and following along with our show and with the Dawgs platform in general, we can't thank you enough. And we appreciate everything you guys do for us. So I'm going to head out of here because we've got a live show coming up for the Browns podcast. And Justin will be back next week, as long as nothing else comes up. And we will be doing a 3 wide receiver, 1 quarterback redraft mock draft, because you guys seem to really like those shows and we love doing them. So we're going to do that. And hope everybody has a great week, great weekend. Enjoy all the preseason football action. Don't get too sucked in to preseason hype. There are preseason darlings every year, but again, there are also preseason gems. It's a fine line we got to walk here at this point in the season with all the training camp hype, with the preseason, but that's what we're going to do next week. We'll break down everything that happened over the weekend from all the games. We'll talk about some of that, some of the stuff that you should pay attention to, and some of the stuff that you can just kind of disregard. So we'll get to all that then. Again, enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Dawgs Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow the podcast on social media at the Dawgs Fantasy.
This episode is brought to you by Danger Coffee. We talk about how Danger Coffee is made free from mold toxins that are in 45% of the world's coffee, but that's not all that Danger Coffee has to offer. Mineral and nutrient deficiencies are a big deal. They make you feel sick, tired, stressed, and they can give you brain fog. These deficiencies negatively affect your immune system, your digestion, sleep, metabolism. Have you ever wondered why you get an initial burst from your coffee, but then you get that little crash not long after? Danger Coffee's patent-pending process remineralizes your body with more than 50 trace minerals and electrolytes, leaving you more energized, engaged, powerful. These micronutrients enter the cells to boost performance. They bind to toxins to provide detoxification support. I know that sounds like a lot, but the bottom line, guys, is minerals matter, and most of us really don't get enough of them on a daily basis. Danger Coffee delivers micronutrients, plus it gives you access to the minerals you already have. Head to dangercoffee.com, use our code DAWGS, DAWGS, for 10% off your order, and that code can be used over and over, so you get 10% off every order you make using code DAWGS. It's time to start every day off with a cup of coffee that gets you going and actually keeps you going. dangercoffee.com, code DAWGS.